I would never have joined the service were it not for the draft. My father was too old for the Second World War. My uncle Edmund joined the Marine Corps even though he had a heart condition which would have made him 4F. Caught malaria on Guadalcanal and died in '55 during open heart surgery. And then my cousin Michael went into the Marine Corps, but he had terrible experiences in boot camp, and eventually they made him a cook. So I didn't want to go in the military at all. If it weren't for the draft, I wouldn't have. But it was a complete life changer with me. Flight school, very good friends. The Black Cats of Phu Loi, wonderful good friends until today. And yeah, it changed my life and for the better. Wouldn't have saved it for the world. Yeah.
Did you have any say then that going into the Army, or was it you just kind of went where they told you?
It took me a while. I had a deferment for college, and they canceled that without any warning, and the draft board was after me. And luckily, I knew enough to demand a flight physical, aptitude test, and a class assignment. I went to 3 different recruiters, and each one of them, oh no, we'll sign you up for something. Once you're in, you just tell them what you want to do. And the 4th one I went to signed me right up. So I was in class flight school 6717 after basic training, which was a nightmare. But flight school was absolutely wonderful. Many, many good friends, good times, and I served with the Black Cats of Phu Loi from January of 1968 until February of 1970. I was a safety officer and chief instructor pilot of the company, and just loved it. Yeah.
When you first arrived there, did you go over on one of those chartered flights, or how did you get over to Vietnam?
An absolute nightmare. They were charter flights, old worn out DC-8s, all different kinds of seats in there, and everybody smoked. And I never smoked, and the place was just, oh my God, I couldn't stand it. All the way across the Pacific. And I went back and forth several times, and every time was just the same, and I just didn't like it a damn bit. The only good thing was one time I saw the sun rise in the west. But other than that, it was awful. It really was.
So how were you received with the 213th when you got in?
Oh, I was so lucky to go to that company. They were one of the finest companies ever. Absolutely wonderful. Now, I had a background in construction and also in music, so they put me in charge of R&U, repair and utilities. And also, we had the Black Cat Combo, guitars and drums music group, and I was in charge of that. And several other minor assignments, but eventually I got out of everything except I was chief instructor pilot and safety officer of the company, and I did that for a long, long time. Yeah.
So you're flying missions in that capacity?
Every day. Every day. I would give in-country orientations, I would give periodic check rides, I would upgrade to aircraft commander check rides, and you do all of this flying normal combat missions. Yes.
So, and what kind of helicopter are you guys on again?
Chinooks.
Chinooks.
Boeing Vertol 107 Chinooks. Heavy lift helicopter. A wonderful bird.
In those combat missions, I assume you're taking fire when you're doing that.
Yes.
Do any of those events stand out in your mind? Maybe your first experience under fire or something a little hairy?
Well, I arrived just in time for 68 Tet Offensive, so it was very, very tough. And one thing I remember, you had to get a flight helmet, of course, and I had my choice of two kinds of helmets, and one was a ballistic helmet, which would actually stop bullets, okay? And it was heavier, so a lot of guys didn't like to wear it, but I figured, what the hell, yeah, I'll wear it. And then I realized, because we got hit with enemy fire a lot, but the bullets never came from down here. They came from up here, so I got a bullet catcher on my head, and I couldn't wait to trade it in and get rid of it. But no, we got shot up quite a bit. Yeah.
In those missions, are you carrying supplies, troops? What do your operations look like, I guess?
What we did a lot was to resupply the field units. We'd also do artillery lift. You'd pick up a 105 howitzer, and there'd be another case underneath with ammunition and personal gear and stuff like that. So we'd move artillery units a lot. We would occasionally make combat assaults. We would have a crew of 5 on the Chinook, or a crew of 6 if we're doing aircraft recoveries, because the VC would love to shoot down a Huey and then shoot up the Chinook when it came in to get the Huey. And the Dorgones don't shoot to the rear, so we'd have a tail gunner as also try to keep them out of the way. And we would do combat assaults with either 44 U.S. troops or 60 ARVNs, Army of Vietnam. Yep.
And when you do those, were you ever coming in under fire on the troop, or is that a signal to get out?
Normally on the combat assaults, we did not come under fire because we did have good support with gunships. But still, it's frightening to be on the ground in that area. The U.S. troops were great. They'd get out and they'd form defensive lines on both sides of the helicopter. The ARVNs were not. You almost couldn't get them to leave. In fact, we discussed it one night. How do we get these guys out, you know? Came up with a really good idea. So the next time we were having a combat assault with the 5th ARVN, and like I say, 60 of them on board, we had a Jack Daniel's whiskey bottle full of iced tea. And we turned off the stability system in the helicopter and let it wobble and wander all over the place. And then we started passing this bottle of iced tea back and forth. And we'd drink about half and then pass it to the back for the crew to enjoy. So as soon as we touched the ground, the guys were gone. It worked.
And are you guys taking casualties in that time? That you recall, I guess.
You mean getting personally injured?
Yeah,
Flying.
your flights or the guys
Yeah.
even the 213.
We would often get hit with enemy fire, but everybody wore a protective vest, and the flight engineer would direct the pilots where to place the load and so on and so forth, and he would lay on a sheet of boilerplate in the back and looking down through the hook hole and direct the pilots on what to do. Once we got out of the service and I started flying commercially, you'd look out down at your load, and you didn't need anybody to tell you what to do. But in the Army at the time, they didn't do that. Yeah.
What are your guys' living conditions like back from where you were flying out of?
We had 2 men to a room, and the Chinook company actually had very few officers. We had, I don't know, maybe 28 or 30 officers, and a lot of NCOs and enlisted because it took a lot of people to keep those helicopters flying. We had 16 assigned to the unit. 2 of them were what they call hangar queens, and they stayed in the hangars at all times to donate parts and pieces, keep the other ones going if needed. But we rarely had more than 8 or 10 helicopters flying at any given time, and 2 of those were for aircraft recovery or fire bucket standby and probably wouldn't fly at all most days. So it was pretty rough to keep them going. Mechanics would basically work all night on them to keep them going. Yeah.
And I'm just curious, when you guys would take fire from the ground, could you see people shooting at you, or was it just kind of, it would just...
In fact, the last time I got shot up, and I'll get that book of stories to you, because this is one that I wrote. The last time I got shot up, and I was, of course, a chief instructor pilot, and I was giving a periodic check ride. You did this every 6 months to everybody. And this was the battalion intelligence officer, a major. And boy, okay, he's supposed to know everything. Well, the thunderstorms in Vietnam were immense, huge things. I was told they'd reach 40,000 feet, but they're relatively harmless. No hail, some lightning, and no big deal, really. Well, the major is flying, the intelligence officer, and rather than go around this thunderstorm, at 2,500 feet, we'd stay at 2,500 feet. That keeps us out of small range fire. He decided to fly under it. And I reminded him, this is very dangerous. You're putting us in small arms range. And he started telling me about this wonderful map that he had in his office that showed all enemy locations, and we were perfectly safe there. No problem at all. Don't worry about it. About that time, we got hit with about a dozen AK-47 rounds scattered from the nose to the tail of the helicopter. And of course, he shut up after that. But after a while, I said, wait a minute, you were telling me about your wonderful map? Not another word out of him. Yeah, we were flying out of Song Bay, which was pretty far to the north. And long flight to get up there, and then you'd support all the units up there and whatnot. And I already had a long day and got a call, would you take another mission? Figured, could have said no, but there's no sense another guy's going to have to fly up here, for another mission. No, of course I did it. Well, next thing you know, there was another mission. And it's now full dark. And we come back into Song Bay to refuel for going home to Phu Loi. And guess what? Another mission. But this one was only one load to be landed on Highway 13, which took us back to Phu Loi. That was our normal flight path. So landed that. Yes, yeah, sure, why not? Landed that. And no sooner had we taken off and we're headed south again, and we came under 50 caliber fire. Picture these giant red basketballs coming right up from there. And in between each one, there's 5 other rounds. So we turned off the lights and dove down to the side. Never got hit, but of course we're out of our normal flight range too. And after a while, I saw runway lights off to the left, and I figured, okay, that's Phu Loi. So I called the Phu Loi tower, and then got closer and called 5 miles. That's what you do. And the tower said, okay, he said, you're clear to land, but we don't have you in sight. Oh, no, really? And then I looked at, well, it wasn't electric lights like Phu Loi's got. They were flare spots for the Phuc Vinh. So I said, okay, actual position is Phuc Vinh, and I'll call you later. 13.8 hours we flew that day.
Was there any limit on what they would let guys fly? Like, you hit this hour and you're through?
No. We flew pretty much every day. You would occasionally have a day off. And I stayed very, very busy. In fact, I had a break in my schedule there for a while and requested a R&R, rest and relaxation flight. And I said, well, I want to go to Sydney, Australia. I've never even been south of the equator, and I loved working with the Aussies. There was Aussie units and Koreans, as well as U.S., and ARVNs, of course. So I booked a flight to Sydney, and I'd already been in country. I was in country more than 2 years with the Black Cats, and your seniority for R&R depends on how long you've been in country. Okay, well, I knocked an Air Force captain off the flight, and there was 2 of them, and they called out my name very loudly as soon as I booked the flight, because knocked one of them off. And they called me to stand at attention, and stood there and read me the riot act. Said, I'm going home soon, and this is my buddy, and he's just lately got here and probably did not qualify for an R&R, hadn't been in country long enough. And you will march up to the counter, and you will cancel your reservation, and you will report back to us after having done so. And by this time, we had a huge audience, all ranks and all services all the way around us, so I'm still standing at attention. I said, sirs, I am traveling alone and don't really care where I go. Had you asked nicely, I would have changed my reservation. As you have failed to do so, I will enjoy my R&R in Sydney. Sirs! I was a warrant officer. Wonderful thing to be. Yeah. You could get away with nearly anything.
So I take it you enjoyed your time in Sydney then?
Well, my seatmate on the plane was a captain, and he was flying gunships on the other side of the runway from Phu Loi for me. So we decided we'll buddy up for our ref, because we're both traveling alone. Got to Sydney, rented rooms next to each other at a good hotel downtown, and just barely into the room, and there's a knock on the door. Okay, open it up, and there's this very pretty young lady. Said, I was in the room a few days ago, and I think I might have lost my sweater. Can I come in to look for it? And have you got any beer? And talk about coincidence, a friend of hers was next door with the captain, also looking for a lost sweater. So we figured the best thing to do, just let the lady show us around town. We ate in all the wonderful places, toured the Opera House, walked over the Bay Bridge, and of course at the end of the week they still hadn't found their sweaters, so of course we bought new ones for them.
Well, I'm curious, because I've talked to other veterans, and obviously when they came back to the United States, the public opinion about veterans was not good at that time. How did the people in Australia treat you, though? Because
let me tell you, and you're right, I have been treated very poorly at airports. Dirty looks, mutterings, and just you name it, just really, really bad. Well, we landed at Darwin for fuel. Now, the flights back from Sydney to Saigon were straight through, because taking off from Saigon is max power, climbing like crazy, less than full fuel tanks. But anyway, we landed at Darwin for fuel on our way down to Sydney. And I looked out, and the Darwin airport isn't much. There's a small terminal, and they have a restaurant and a bar, and just practically, and they had to walk some ways over there, truck-mounted air stairs, and drove up. And I looked out, and there's a mob around the air stairs. I thought, oh no, not on my R&R, please no, Well, I stepped off the air stairs and I got grabbed on either side by an officer. He said, come here, Mike, gonna buy you a beer. Oh yes, pretty much the whole town turned out to welcome everybody. Beer and food was free, and if you got back on that plane sober, it was your own damn fault. Wonderful people. And once in Sydney, if you're sitting at a bar, and they realize that you're a U.S. soldier, you didn't pay for your drinks at all. They treated you so well, it was just amazing. Just amazing.
And then what's it like when you get back to the United States and you've been gone for such a long time? How do people receive you or your family, or, readjusting?
It was good. I enjoyed being back, visiting with my mother and father. We lived in Fairhaven, New Jersey at the time, and I tended bar for a while, and then I decided I would just use a GI Bill and go get all my civilian licenses so I could be a commercial pilot. And I had a very nice 1946 Willys Jeep. So I bought a little trailer, towed it out to Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Spartan School of Aviation, and went through my schooling out there. And after I got out, I was offered a job with New York Airways, which is a helicopter airline in the New York area, and did that for a while, and then came out and worked for Columbia Helicopters, and I went to work on the #1 helicopter logging job ever in the whole world. And I was still doing it until the time I decided to retire from commercial flying the year that I turned 70.